From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bays, we listen to my friend Steve Azar. One Mississippi, the theme song to SuperTalk Outdoors. I want to welcome you to SuperTalk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi, because Mississippi is the capital of the outdoors in America. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful SuperTalk Mississippi radio network, or on SuperTalk TV at C-Spire TV. But some of you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or listening on your favorite podcast. It's September the 11th, 2023. You know, today's the anniversary of 9/11, 22 years ago. 22 years ago. Who doesn't remember where they were in that moment? I was actually at a reception of community leaders in my honor, celebrating me becoming the publisher and president of the Sun Herald. And as we stood there in this reception, we looked up at the TV that was on, and we watched the second plane, United Airlines flight 175, fly into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. What an incredible moment in the United States history. And today we remember those who were part of that unfortunate day, and we honor the lives of those lost in the tragic events that unfolded not only that day but in the events that followed. You know, it serves as a great reminder for us about our resilience, about how we can all come together in the face of adversity. Today we pay tribute to those heroes, and we think about the so many who sacrificed their lives, not only that day but in the events that follow. Think about also the military and the first responders and all those who continue to protect our freedoms today. You know, we can never forget the lessons learned as a result of 9/11. And frankly, more today than ever, we've got to strive for a world that is filled with peace and understanding. That's our legacy to our kids and our grandkids. So as we think about the events of 9/11, we think about how it was really a great reminder to all of us, it still is today, that some still harbor hostility toward the values and the freedoms that we cherish here in America. Just think about the freedoms we enjoy as outdoorsmen and women. Wow. God bless the United States of America. By the way, the views on this show are mine, not those of the Foundation for Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, separate 501(c) organization than the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. But, you know, what I like to say each week, when it comes to outdoors and outdoors issues, you can count on me to say what needs to be said. And I am really, really honored to be here. Now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Houston Havens, who is the Waterfowl Program Coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and someone I have a tremendous amount of respect for and has become a good friend. How you doing, Houston?
Doing well. Enjoyed a little bit of cooler air this morning, so things are.
Yeah, I walked out. It is still hot on the coast, but still a little bit of coolness in the air. You know, just reminder that fall's not far behind. And I'm actually glad to see a little bit of cool air, because we got a lot of work to do up at deer camp, and you know how that happens. A lot of fast and furious work between now and the start of the season. Same thing happens in the duck world for sure. Hey, before we get into what you do these times of day, and there's a lot to talk about waterfowl, I actually want to get an update on the avian influenza situation and anything else that might be on your mind. But, you know, you heard what I said about September the 11th. You know, man, it's hard to believe it was 22 years ago, isn't it?
It is. You know, we were talking before the show started about, you know, where I was that day, and I don't have the type of memory that really I can remember when things happened a lot of times, but I definitely remember that day for sure. I was an undergraduate student at Mississippi State University, walking to class and heard, you know, a little, you know, kind of buzz, you know, people talking about it. Didn't really know what was going on until I got to my classroom, and the professor was telling us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'd become the president publisher of the newspaper on August the 1st of 2001, and I remember, of course, we took a little bit of time to kind of get settled down, and then we had a series of receptions where we were just having, doing a toast to the community and, expressing my commitment to the community. I remember I was on Highway 90 about to turn up on DeBees Road when when the news of the first airplane came across, and I was listening very carefully, and it was clear that, at first I think they thought maybe it was a small plane that had ventured off path, and then the reality of the amount of damage, and we started to understand that it was actually an airline passenger jet that had gone into the World Trade Center. But yeah, I knew going into this event that we were holding at the conference room at the Sun Herald that something terrible was unfolding. And so one of the things we did is we rolled a big TV up into the conference room, and we had it playing in the background. And so we went on with the meeting, and when as we all stood in silence, in the aftermath of the second plane flying into the South Tower, Stan Tyner, who was the executive editor of the Sun Herald at the time, kind of leaned toward me and said, I think we ought to end this meeting and go focus on doing a special edition of the Sun Herald. And that's what we did. We literally kind of ended the meeting. And folks, I heard afterward, they kind of stood around for quite a while, actually, just watching the events unfold on TV. They knew this was a historic moment. And then we did a special edition of the Sun Herald. I remember I brought the team together afterwards and said, life as we know it will never be the same again. That a lot of vulnerabilities, we were very vulnerable as Americans. We didn't really appreciate how much so. And now, it will, we will watch the events unfold, but the world's going to be different in every aspect. And throughout the day, we contemplated just how much it was going to change. And boy, it did, didn't it, man? It so much changed after that.
Yeah, it did. Certainly did. Just thinking about, all the travel and everything, people's long-term plans had to do a lot of changing really quickly.
Hey, you know what's interesting though? It is, Haley Barbour used to say after Hurricane Katrina that the Chinese symbol for disaster also means opportunity. That it's a yin yang, that, where you see a disaster, you also see opportunity. And he always reminded us of that after Hurricane Katrina. Well, same thing's true about the events of September the 11th. Man, it was just a terrible disaster. But there really was this opportunity, a rallying moment where we as Americans came together. And, we should always look back on that, in this moment where we're so polarized and the world seems polarized and social media divides us and all the stuff that we deal with. It is a great reminder that we are, in fact, very, very resilient. And the freedoms that we enjoy as Americans, especially as outdoorsmen, I mean, think about what we have access to, public land and the right to bear arms and all the stuff that goes with that. But as outdoorsmen, we have freedoms that are afforded to us that no other country in the world has the opportunity to enjoy. And I think it just plays out in the outdoor space in ways that are incredibly special. And yeah, the majority of the outdoorsmen I know, they don't take that for granted. But it's true though, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, you're right. As far as I know, there's no better place to be an outdoorsman than here in the United States, and in Mississippi in particular.
So Houston, you've got a lot that goes through your mind. We've had terrific shows in the past that talks about how the work that you're involved in around waterfowl is really a 365-day-a-year job as you monitor all the planning that's required, the work that's done on public land, which I think is a best practice in America, the work that y'all do there, when you can have no ducks in other areas and there's always going to be ducks on the public land. It's because you guys have been really focused on doing that. But as we look forward to the season, and you think about weather always plays a big role. What's going on up north always plays a big role in what we're going to experience here. What do you see in how the season's unfolding as we speak?
Well, just like you said, I mean, the weather patterns throughout the fall and winter are going to be the driving factor overall. But it's really dry right now. I'm certainly not telling you anything you don't know. You've been up through the Mississippi Delta recently and seen conditions. Um, so first thing, obviously, it's going to take a lot of rainfall for rain-dependent areas.
Hey, why don't we do this here? We'll pick it up right there. We'll talk about sort of the weather conditions and the drought and the heat dome and all that goes with that and how it's going to play into this year's duck season when we continue our conversation on the other side with my friend Houston Havens from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. We'll see you after this break.
Sweet soul for him. I said 3 Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on. I'll carry on. Mississippi.
Leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I have my friend Houston Havens, who is the Waterfowl Program Coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And I've been looking forward to talking to you, Houston. You started to allude to it just a second ago, but man, you got this heat dome over the entire United States for so long, man, so little bit of rain. I had a great conversation with a friend of mine from Vicksburg who's in the barge business. And, last year they had to deal with low Mississippi River conditions that were just incredible. And of course, he has to look north as well. I mean, if you get rain, now look, it doesn't have to be immediately north of Vicksburg, obviously. It can be way far. And they've had just enough rain that Mississippi River levels haven't been to disastrously low levels, but still something they're paying a lot of attention to. But boy, when it comes to duck hunting, what happens north of us all the way to Canada really plays big time into the overall discussion. So how do you think, if we don't get a lot of rain, how do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, you're right. We're kind of getting into the months where we get very little rain, and so that late summer start to this drought that we're in right now, kind of put us even further behind than normal. But there's always pluses and minuses to habitat variables like that. We're seeing a lot of areas where areas that we would call permanent or semi-permanent wetlands, oxbows, things like that are drawn down naturally right now. I've got some mud flats exposed, and those are good areas for producing, what we would just call simply duck food late in the summer, early fall. So they're putting on a flush of vegetation right now. Ideally, those will be flooded back to more normal levels by the time duck season ends this winter. So it'll be available to ducks. But there's some good value in having some dry conditions. Of course, if there are people listening right now who are in a duck lease that are going to be looking at turning pumps on in a little while to try to provide some shallow water habitat for late November, then that's going to hit the pocketbook pretty good probably. We're dealing with the same thing on wildlife management areas, trying to get pump motors serviced and be sure that we have diesel ready to go to start running those motors, because it's gonna take quite a bit to fill those cracks in and start to put surface water out there.
Wow, I can only imagine, both with the natural gas or propane, and then of course the diesel generated pumps that are going to be out there. There was a good rain on one of the farms that I lease up in the Delta last week. Actually, it was a really good rain, and I thought, wow, that's going to create some super muddy conditions when you think about how dusty it was. And I talked to my friend the next day, and he said there's absolutely no sign that it rained yesterday. It was like, the Delta, just like a sponge, soaked it all up, and the dry conditions, in a cloud of dust, there was literally no sign that it even rained. And it rained pretty hard, man. But that's what's going to happen when you turn those pumps on. It's going to take a while to get those areas where they get in the situation where they can hold some water. But hey, you alluded to something a minute ago, and I don't want to get too far away from that. The point you made was that when some of these oxbows and lakes and other areas that typically hold a lot of water, as they go down and expose mud flats, what happens on those mud flats is natural growth. And you and I've talked about this before, that people tend to think about going in and planting, and certainly there are certain seeds that you can plant that are great for duck food, etc. But you've always said never underestimate what happens just as part of nature in the wild growth scenarios. Talk a little bit about what those wild growth plants are that attract ducks, and what we shouldn't turn our head too far away from.
Yeah, so that kind of managing for natural grasses and sedges, annual seed-producing plants, or what we would just generally call moist soil management. Like you said, we're not against planting crops. We work with a lot of private landowners on planting what we call waterfowl food plots, essentially, and managing those. So those are certainly an important piece of the puzzle. A lot of agricultural lands across the Mississippi Delta that get flooded every year play an important role for waterfowl food availability. But yeah, managing water levels and the seed banks that are just naturally existing there can really produce an abundance of duck food. And as people are looking around, maybe getting ready for bow season, maybe not even thinking about duck season right now, I would encourage people to kind of look around these wet areas, or these semi-permanent or permanent wetlands, lake areas that are drawing down right now, and see that flush of vegetation, because a lot of that is going to turn into really quality duck food.
Well, and I bet people are doing little inventories right now, saying, okay, now where are my lakes, and where are my oxbows, and where are the breaks, and where's some water, some hardwood bottoms that typically hold some water even when you have dry conditions. They're doing a lot of inventory in those areas right now, because as you've just helped us understand before, when you've got a situation where there's not a lot of water, and so let's say it gets pretty cold up north, those ducks are going to come in, and they're going to be looking for those areas of water. It might concentrate some ducks. It could create a pretty good scenario if we stay in a situation where the rainfall is below what we would normally expect this time of year. But you've heard that story before, haven't you?
Absolutely. I actually heard it this weekend. Mississippi had its opener for the teal season, started Saturday. It goes through September 24th. And talked with some landowners who, normally would be turning the pumps on, to put a little bit more surface water on some of the areas that were already flooded, and those areas are dry right now. But they've shifted over to, just like you said, those more deep water habitats, whether it be catfish ponds or sloughs, breaks, things like that. And they're finding success because of the limited habitat availability. And then you think about what we do on public lands. If we head into a year like we had last year, which this is certainly shaping up to be so far, public lands will really carry the ball on shallow water, managed quality waterfowl habitat. And we expect to have really good hunting on those areas if that is the case going into the season.
Yeah, I remember I told you the story before, but when my son Jordan was in law school at Ole Miss, he used to get up real early in order to make his way to some of those public lands, where you guys had sheet water. And he'd get there super early, really early. And there'd be a line there already trying to get to those spots. But y'all really perfected that, as you pointed out, and it's really paid off over the years. But you think about migratory bird hunting, and September there's great opportunity. You just mentioned it just a second ago with teal season opening up. What's the early reports on how it went?
Really good reports on some of our public lands, and just a few private landowners that we've talked with. It's probably a function of limited habitat availability, so people are really able to dial in on where those birds are. And then I guess a little bit of good news also, some colleagues that we have with the Illinois Natural History Survey do a lot of shorebird and early waterfowl aerial surveys this time of year, similar to the surveys we'll be getting into later this year in Mississippi. And they're reporting that fairly large numbers, above average numbers of teal are still north of us, which for us just means that we haven't missed the migration. A lot of times it's just really hard to time a 16-day teal season with the bulk of the migration, as those birds are really passing through and heading on further south from here. But it sounds like that we still got a bulk of the migration to still come through. Hopefully we'll time it right with our season.
That's exciting. That's exciting. I mean, when you say come on through, and I can't help but think about a teal flying when you say that and think they don't just come through, they come through pretty fast.
They do, yeah. We tell people, people will call our office a lot of times and ask where we're seeing birds, and we try to caution them that it really doesn't matter. They could be gone by tomorrow before you could even get there. So it's certainly you want to do your scouting as best you can and find good habitat, but those birds are really they're always in a hurry.
They are. They're not easy to shoot down, and if you're not in the right place at the right time, to see that migration pass through, you might miss it. That's kind of the bottom line. But we've traditionally had a pretty decent teal season here in Mississippi, haven't we?
We have, it's all about just trying to hit the timing of those 16 days. And we always put our priority on maximum number of weekends. So that's why we've set our season to try to get as late into the month, but also overlap 3 consecutive weekends with that 16-day season. And so we get a few questions from time to time on why the season moves. And that's really the reason for that.
Anything else you want to say about duck? I want to, before we get done, I want to ask you about avian influenza, but anything else on ducks while we're there? Yeah.
Yeah, so one more thing, we encourage private landowners and public land managers to take advantage of years like this. I said earlier, there's always some advantages to having, extreme weather conditions. And with things being really dry right now, we're hearing from landowners that are saying, hey, I've never seen this slough get this dry, or the water levels get this low. And so we're encouraging people to take advantage of that if they can, if that means getting equipment in there and kind of cleaning up an area that they haven't been able to get into in a while, making openings in natural vegetation, or maybe in the woods, or in really thick buckbrush, places like that, just to do everything they can to prepare for when the water is back on those areas.
Well, that's pretty cool. Listen, hang in there with me for a second, and let's take this into the third segment a bit. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Houston Havens. We'll see you after this.
Carry on, Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors on this day, September the 11th. 22 years ago, that incredible event happened. And as I said at the beginning of the show, it is a reminder of annually, frankly, of our freedoms in this country and how resilient we are as Americans. And God bless the United States of America. We're lucky to live here. And I think it's good for us every now and then to freeze frame the moment and think about how lucky we really are. That is for sure. Hey, we're having a conversation with my friend Houston Havens, who is the Waterfowl Program Coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Houston, the thing that blows my mind, it seems like you and I were just talking, literally, we talked a year ago, but it seems like it was last month as we were just thinking about the kind of activities you got to be involved in toward the end of the summer as you begin to prepare for the duck season. But man, where did this year go?
Time flies when they're having fun, I guess. Yeah, it's hard to believe that hunting seasons are already kicked back off, and we're talking about migratory birds heading south and more to come, hopefully. And it's getting time to start shifting gears into that hunting mentality.
Hey, listen, I think about the farmer friends that I have, the Dunn family, my dear friend Travis Dunn up in the Mississippi Delta, who we lease land from. And I think about my friends who are big-time duck hunters, and lots of friends who have lots of land and they deer hunt and they have a couple of duck holes, et cetera. But, I think about the work that they do to create good duck habitat. And I mean, they put a lot of energy into it, man. They trying to plant the right things and trying to get everything just right. What I learned through them, and I've said this on the show many times before, it's a great reminder that it's not just about the actual, bringing your shotgun out and pulling the trigger on a duck. The process of duck hunting, this is a 365-day-a-year passion for a lot of people. Just the process brings people together. But there's a lot of work, and if you don't enjoy doing that work, you probably ought not be a duck hunter, huh?
That's right. It's certainly not all about killing birds or, numbers, anything like that. As soon as that water comes off in the spring or summer, whenever, whatever the case may be, that's when the work starts, because that growing season, we have a long growing season here in the South, and you got to stay on top of things because things will change from week to week really quickly and can get away from you.
Hey, do you guys plant corn in some of the public land areas?
We do use corn. We have a few areas where we have a farm lease, and so it's mostly an agricultural operation, and farmers will grow and harvest corn in some of those areas, and then we'll also use corn strips in other farmed areas that we'll leave unharvested, and that's kind of a dual purpose for supplementing a little bit of duck food there, and then also giving some hunter cover. And so that kind of, that works well for us to be able to use that. We try to mix in the moist soil habitats like we talked about earlier, and try to give as much habitat diversity on an area as we can.
Hey, one of the things that's interesting is that, again, working with my farmer friend, watching how they decide what they're going to plant, and of course world conditions, you think about what's going on in Ukraine and how that affects prices, and then, whereas usually they have some sort of orderly rotation of crops. Some of that has actually changed, whereas before they might have had cotton, they've got a lot of corn now, or maybe where they had cotton, they've got soybeans now. So it's interesting. I'll make a quick comment about this, and that is that if you talk to farmers just in general, their yields are really up pretty good this year. And, I think had kind of the right kind of growing season. Man, the harvest has been awesome for them as it relates to the weather. The dry conditions have been perfect, as they spray their soybeans and cotton and get ready to take those. But, and the efforts to get the corn, I mean, they've had so many day after day of dry conditions that have really enabled them. So their yields are doing extremely well. But there's also a lot, probably, I don't know this for a fact, but a lot more corn and soybeans than you would normally see, just because, the prices on those have really precipitated planting those crops as opposed to, say, cotton, for example. Do you see a change? Do you notice a difference in the season when you have a lot of food sources that might be out there that typically aren't?
Yeah, I mean, those commodity prices, markets, in the ag world definitely drive a lot of the variables that are, that are related to duck habitat, especially in areas like the Mississippi Delta, up and down the Mississippi River in other states. And so, yeah, I mean, it certainly it plays a big role, just depending on what that crop type is, because a lot of those are better set up to flood during the wintertime to begin with. We are seeing sort of a negative trend as far as the amount of water that's being put on agricultural lands, not just in Mississippi in general. And that's also due to just economy, the economics of agricultural production. And so working with a lot of landowners, trying to, generate a little bit more interest in, putting that water on the ag landscape. It helps to have good weather and a lot of birds there for people to, have that motivation to continue to provide that habitat, because a lot of it doesn't just happen for free.
Yeah, it's a big deal for you, Houston, isn't it? That you want, just over the past many decades, this process of creating more ag land has taken away habitat. So if the more we can take that habitat during key migration periods and create water and food sources and whatever else there might be, it's only going to help the situation. But you got to be very focused on that, don't we?
We do. It can still be quality habitat. It just takes having some I guess incentive, whether that's in birds or financially, whatever the case may be, to put it out there, and particularly in times like this, years like this, when it looks like we're going to be headed into a pretty dry fall and maybe winter.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. You look back at last year, And yeah, our season was really good last year. We had a good season. My personal experience with hunting was really good. And as you have pointed out on past shows, last year it was kind of spotty depending on where you were. Some people had really good seasons. Some people, it was down. I think what you said was on average, it was a pretty decent season. It was about an average season. It wasn't necessarily significantly low number of ducks, and it wasn't high, but just on average, it was a pretty decent season last year, wasn't it?
It was, and part of that was a relatively dry year, we think. Just like you said, from our aerial waterfowl surveys, duck numbers didn't really hit really high levels compared to past years, but the birds that we have, we would say were huntable, for lack of a better term there. And so public lands did really well. We had several wildlife management areas that had record numbers actually for harvest. And so overall, yeah, it was definitely better than the previous 2 to 3 years.
Hey, listen, we had if that's all, I want to kind of shift it to the avian influenza. We had a couple of Canadian geese that would for what, year after year, they'd come back and nest in the same area, right? I mean, we could see out of our window here on Back Bay. And suddenly we only noticed there was one, and the other one, it vanished. And then, the one that was left would just swim in circles and do stuff. And I said, we need to keep an eye on that one. That they may have avian influenza. And not long after that, I saw a 10-foot alligator. So I'm thinking the alligator got the one, and that the other just wasn't leaving. Maybe there was a nest nearby, or something like that. Eventually it flew away, and it did whatever they do when they lose their partner. But the story is a good story, at least as it relates to avian influenza. You got to pay attention to when you see birds that might have that odd behavior. Something you guys want to know about, isn't it?
That's right. We want hunters and the public in general just to be vigilant again this year as we're headed back into fall migration, just to look for sick and dead birds and let us know about it if they do see them. We're not talking about one bird here or there necessarily, because there is a lot of different sources of natural mortality, especially as birds are traveling long distances. Is pretty hard on them. But we are actively going to be starting surveillance again with USDA Wildlife Services, looking at harvested birds and any birds that we find, sick or dead on the landscape, and doing some testing just to see where we are. Overall, nationally, right now, we are looking a little bit better as far as wild bird mortalities. There seems to be a bit of immunity that's built up in the population for wild birds, and so hopefully we won't see as much as we did last year, but we're still going to be, looking at it and keeping an eye on things for sure.
When we look at it, just at the United States, what are the experts saying about the status of avian influenza now?
It just seems to be down overall, but as you're aware, last year we didn't really get ramped up until right before the regular duck season opener. It was actually the night before Thanksgiving, the first call that I got out to go on a snow goose die-off, and things just really kind of blew up all of a sudden there, and we were scrambling all over trying to do some testing, and then things kind of went down pretty quickly after that. Thank goodness.
Well, we're talking with my friend Houston Havens, who is the waterfowl coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and we'll see you after this break.
Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on. I'll carry on. Mississippi.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I have my friend Houston Havens, who is the waterfowl program coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and we're thrilled to have him. And, we've really covered the waterfront. There's been a lot to talk about with Houston. I enjoy doing that. We talked a little bit about teal a few minutes ago, Houston, but that's not the only season that's open at the time, is there? Is it?
That's right. We also have a Canada Goose season that opened September 1st and will run all the way through September 30th. And it's a really key time for people to take advantage of a hunting season, because this hunting season is specifically geared toward resident Canada geese. They're the geese that people are having problems with in subdivisions and golf courses, places like that. People that are watering their grass, trying to keep their yards alive through the drought, probably having some geese if they have water bodies, near their homes. And so we really encourage people to take advantage of this time of year right now, whether they're waterfowl hunters themselves or if they just know people who might be interested. Obviously, a lot of these birds are used in urban areas that where hunting is not conducive, but this time of year, you've got corn harvest going on, you've got other agricultural crops that'll be coming off pretty soon, and these birds typically will start to change their patterns and move to those new habitats, especially freshly harvested corn. And so those can be really good opportunities to both have some quality hunting and help with a management scenario, with reducing these populations of local geese.
Hey, when you think about the geese situation and thinking of this as an opportunity to manage maybe some nuisance scenarios that might exist, how big of a problem is that?
It's a really big problem depending on where you are. A lot of developments have happened. People like to live in, nice areas with, lots of ornamental plants around, lakes or ponds, things like that, and they're just really, really good attractants for Canada geese also. And so we deal with people, or we work with people a lot throughout the year, starting in the springtime when these geese are showing up in pairs and looking for nesting territories. That's a key time of year also, just to try to control the numbers, whether that's through just making the area less hospitable to those birds before they start to nest, doing some nest control through a permit through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and on through the summertime leading up to the hunting season. Of course, the hunting season is what is the tool that we recommend the most of actually controlling their numbers.
Hey, Houston, you mentioned it a few minutes ago, but when these dry conditions and this, as you think about the flurry of activity that's going to be going on around duck scenarios across the state of Mississippi, this is when you're really dry like it is, it's a great opportunity to go in there and make some improvements on ponds and board structures and lots of stuff that can be done. I mean, this is a great opportunity to be able to make improvements and fix some stuff and maybe create some new stuff. Boy, I bet there's a lot of that going on across the state right now.
There is. We're having a lot of those conversations with private landowners right now, just, trying to encourage them to not let anything, slip by, and then you're sitting out there during duck season wishing you had done something, when it's already got water on it, things have kind of gotten away from you. Nobody wants to be out doing a lot of manual labor right now, and, there's not a lot of people thinking about duck season right now probably, but it is a really good time of year to get out and check those water control structures. Check your levees, be sure that there haven't been any, rodents burrowing through or tunneling through and are going to start to give you problems when you do start to put that water on and then realize, man, I really should have been out here handling this, when it was dry conditions. And then just, making those openings in natural vegetation, whether it's the woods or, moist soil habitat. Before that water gets on, you've got a really good opportunity right now to get out there and set things exactly the way. Just think about the way that you want it to look after it gets water on it, but you can kind of have some control over it right now.
Yeah, boy, I tell you, I can't help but think about this. The difference in conditions from what we're looking at in most places across the state, where you have these great dry conditions where you can do, you can get heavy equipment into places you normally can't get heavy equipment into. The difference between doing work in those conditions versus, like, say, even medium moist conditions, because even a medium moist condition with heavy equipment, you're in serious trouble. So this is, a really unique opportunity, isn't it?
It is, just like you said, there's a lot that, working in duck holes, quote unquote duck holes, is hard a lot of times. And so, you can tear up equipment in mud, you can tear up just the habitat and kind of cause more issues than you had before you went in there if it's not the right conditions. But there's a lot of areas that can hold up heavy equipment right now. So we encourage people to get after it when they can.
Well, Houston, it's been great to catch up with you, my friend. You've been a good friend to SuperTalk Outdoors and to me, and I really appreciate the work that you and your team do to make Mississippi a leader in the waterfowl conversation. And we'll stay in touch as we get closer to the season. We'll have you back on and kind of get a lay of the land on how the season's looking.
Thank you. Always enjoy it.
You bet. This has been my friend Houston Haven, who's the waterfowl coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Have a great day. And as I always end every show, we really appreciate you joining us. Always stay safe when you're in the outdoors. We really appreciate it. God bless you, and we'll see you next Monday.